It fell to the ground. The hero began digging maniacally and ominous laughed, saying that he had found wealth. He smiled obsessively and said that he was raking in money with a shovel. A system window appeared that it seemed that he was happier with his find than with his attempts to prevent the barrier from activating. He replied that some kind of barrier was talking about money, free money. Sunset came. A system window appeared that the hero's level had been raised, Azrakan Core Technique Triple Rings Level 3. The hero took 30 pieces of precious stones. He barely lifted his backpack and thought that now he had 30 Bayon. He had money to make 30 Bayon his slaves. Bayon coughed. The guy told him that he needed to rest a little, he worked too much. Lloyd looked into the distance and said how nice it was. He walked forward and said that they would raise his salary and make him work for him for another 20 years, and let it seem to him that instead of 20 years he worked all 30. Suddenly the guy stopped. He turned around. The hero was looking at the skull. He sat down and asked how it ended up here. Was it natural death or murder? The skull was silent. Lloyd and said that no matter what happened to it he would like to express his gratitude to it for giving him 1 night per minute. The guy took the skull in his hands. He collected the skulls in a bag and said that he would take them to a place where there is a lot of sun. He hopes that now they can rest in peace. The skull was melting. Drops were collecting on it. Night had fallen. The guys were sitting opposite each other. Xavier raised his head and said that the reason he was dressed like that. The brunette looked at him and said that they were all different and could not always understand them. Everyone had their own preferences. He accepted his specific preferences. The knight looked at him with an empty gaze. He looked at the brunette and said that the whole city already knew him as a knight who came from distant lands. He needed to hide his identity in order to get more details. He replied that it was fine. He understood everything perfectly. Xavier frowned. The guys sat in silence. Lloyd calmly looked at him and asked when he discovered this new side of himself. The blue-haired frowned and shouted that it was not like that at all. The hero jumped and asked why he was so angry. Is it bad? Is he really expressing his contempt for everyone who has similar preferences now? The haired man lowered his head looking for what he had the opportunity to get to the estate when he was running errands for the distribution center. The hero asked did he find anything. The knight said that under the estate there was another door that led to the dungeon. He looked ahead and said that at first when he watched Canavero it seemed to him that there was no one kinder and more caring than him. So he thought that Lloyd was wrong when he began to suspect him. Looking like he was hiding something behind 7 locks, it seems that his instinct did not fail him again. The hero looked at him in surprise when he said that he would be proof and no matter what it would cost him. The guy smiled. He bowed his head and said that this is exactly why he should not trust his words and is proud of his respect. He replied that it is not so at all. After a while, Canavero frowned and asked did all of Noctanium really disappear. The man frowned and said that someone took everything they buried. Because of this their entire grand plan failed. The brunette clenched his fist and thought did someone find out about his plans? If that were the case, they would have come for him long ago. Maybe it was a coincidence. The old man looked at him and asked what he intended to do. They had everything ready. After all, he said that everything would go according to plan. The other man said that they had invested a lot of money in his projections. After all, he had convinced them that black magic had remade this world. He should be responsible for his words. Canavero slammed the table and asked them not to worry, he had a plan. He said that in any case, Noctanium was just a backup plan in case of an emergency. The man smiled and said that if they all united for the final push, the ascension of the Prince of Hell would go as planned. Someone threw a bucket of water. It landed right on Xavier's head. The woman ran up to him and asked what had happened to him. He replied that his hand had simply slipped a little. The brunette looked around nervously and said that he probably knew that Mr. Canavero's house had a guest room. He could go there and change. He should go there right now. All those men were staring at him. The spectators were saying what a gorgeous body she had. Xavier went to the gate and asked to open it. The man said this is his body. The guy changed his clothes and thought that now it would be much easier for him to move around. He exhaled. The guy thought that he needed to completely hide his presence. He jumped out of the window. The knight ran past the guards. In front of him was the door to the basement. The blue-haired man looked around the corner and thought that this is the door that leads to the second-level basement. How can he open this door? He noticed something. Canavero approached the door. He looked around. He unlocked the lock with magic. A magic circle appeared in his palm. The lock began to spin. It lit up. The knight looked closely and thought that this lock was different from the one hanging on the main gate. It could only be opened by a certain flow of mana. The stones in the backpack shimmered. The hero looked at them and thought if this was really all, and if there were more of them somewhere and Namaran's barrier could be activated with them. Lloyd lowered his head and thought that he could not let this happen. Saliva flowed from his mouth. He thought that it was time to look for money again. A system window appeared. Was he not doing this for the sake of finding possible means for black magic? He replied that he said money. Canavero came out from behind the door. Xavier watched him. He waited for the man to leave. The guy approached the door. He frowned and thought that he definitely used something like this. The lock gave in. Xavier went inside. He looked forward. The knight took a step forward. He frowned. There was darkness ahead. Suddenly, someone ran towards him from there. Xavier looked closer. The monster swung. The knight dodged and thought, what was that? Was it really a dead man? His fist glowed. He hit the monster in the stomach. The guy looked at him in shock. The monster swung at him. He hit the knight. He flew back. The blue-haired man frowned and thought that this was no ordinary undead. It was definitely different from the ones he had seen in the valley. Many other monsters came out into the corridor. Xavier exhaled. He reached into his inner pocket. The guy pulled out a knife. He got into a fighting stance and said that he was able to confirm his suspicions about Canavero. Xavier prepared to attack. He frowned. A man came out of the door. He slammed the door. The knight looked at him and thought that it looked like he could have a conversation with him. The monsters rushed to attack him. He swung their swords. The undead continued to run at him. Xavier killed them one after another. With one swing of his sword, he chopped off their limbs. The knight cut the monsters into pieces. He swung his sword to strike and knocked down the door with one blow. The man fell to the ground. Xavier looked at him. The bald man bowed and asked for mercy. He looked up when the knight said he had a question for him. He had broken the man's leg. He screamed. The blue-haired man said that if he delayed answering for even a second, the other leg would suffer the same fate. The guy frowned and asked what Canavero was doing in this place. He answered that he did not know all the details, he just did what he was told. Xavier raised his leg. The man screamed that he was simply hired as an undertaker. He was only treating the bodies that Mr. Canavero brought here with chemicals, and then he was suddenly ordered to guard this place. Xavier looked at him and asked where the bodies came from. The man turned away and said that it was all a trading post. The bodies of refugees who died of diseases were sent here. The blue-haired man frowned. He remembered Canavero saying he would send the girl's father to the trading post. He would recover quickly with good care. Xavier gritted his teeth and thought he had killed them. He thought all the skulls and stones Master Lloyd had found and all the dead he had killed. The knight looked at the man and asked if it seemed strange that the corpses kept coming. His eyes widened and he said he was just as complicit. And he broke his other leg. Xavier ran out of the basement and thought that very soon they would realize that someone had gotten into their lair. He had to report to Master Lloyd and then think of a response. He ran into their room. The guy grabbed the sword and thought he couldn't waste time looking for it. He had to make a decision and act himself. He would deal with Canavero himself. Xavier turned around. He rushed forward and thought that Canavero and the others who were discussing things he couldn't understand were all from the trading post. The knight jumped and thought that the trading post was definitely their base. He rushed into the building. The boy grabbed his sword. He pulled out the aura sword. Xavier looked down in shock. The building was empty. He walked forward and thought that the place that was always full of people was empty. The boy looked around. He frowned and thought, have they really started to act? A dark cloud appeared over the city. Suddenly, the knight staggered. He gritted his teeth and thought what was happening. It felt like his strength was being sucked out. He ran outside. The dark cloud was sucking in the life energy of the people. Xavier looked up and thought what was going on. A barrier began to appear around the city. The knight's sword also began to suck out energy. He thought that someone was sucking out the mana from the people. The people began to fall to the ground. Xavier gritted his teeth and thought that Mr. Lloyd was in danger now. The energy was being drained. Celeria looked out the window. Her eyes widened. She watched as her people fell and cried for help. The girl ran forward and thought that she didn't understand what was going on, but she had to save them. She took hold of the amulet and thought that everything was fine. She would be fine. The man was erecting a barrier around the city. He frowned and thought that Noctanium and the spell that Canavero gave him were doing their job. The Prince of Hell would soon ascend. The man smiled and thought that the world would be theirs. He opened his eyes in shock and thought, just who is this guy? Lloyd leaned over and said that he wanted to ask him a question. He met 30 weirdos in robes like him. Are they making it rain or something? He waited for an answer. The guy approached the sorcerer's face and asked why he wasn't answering his question. Was he really trying to ignore him? Did he think he was invisible? The man trembled and thought that he had scared the crap out of him. How could a person be so scary? He had almost thought that the Prince of Hell had appeared ahead of time. He couldn't move. If he moved even a little, everything would be lost. The hero turned away and said that he didn't care. If he wanted to act like he was invisible, then go ahead. The man looked at him in fear. Lloyd swung his shovel and said that they would see how long he could ignore him. The hero hit him in the face. He looked at his shovel in bewilderment. It was dented. The man smiled and thought that this magic was called protection from steel, which Canavero had cast on him. A simple shovel wouldn't hurt him. Lloyd swung again. The sorcerer looked at the shovel in shock. A dark cloud hung over the city. Steam was coming from the shovel. Lloyd looked at the shovel with confusion. The man thought how stupid it was. He smiled with all 30 of his teeth. He thought that the power of this magic's defense was absolute. He couldn't even leave a scratch. The hero said that he looked so self-confident now, but he must be in a lot of pain now. The brunette looked away and thought that the situation was quite urgent, but everything was not going according to plan. At such moments he needed to remain cool and calm. He extended his hand and thought that if he could absorb mana like last time. He was struck by electricity. The sorceress smiled. Lloyd raised his eyebrows and asked if he was going to move or if he couldn't. Would something happen to the barrier if he moved? The man frowned. The hero smiled and said that he didn't have to answer since he was going to check it out anyway. The barrier stood above the city hall of Namaran. Canavero walked forward. Around him, people were lying exhausted. The man extended his hand to him and asked him to save him. The brunette looked at him. He frowned and called him a slug. Canavero kicked him in the face. He looked away. The man approached the statue and said that this was a statue of a fallen angel. He cut his finger. The brunette smiled and said that this statue would become a gate for the Prince of Hell to pass through. The ground flew away. The sorcerer looked ahead in shock. The hero was digging something. He wiped the sweat from his face. The man was swaying. Lloyd said that the preparations were complete. He approached the sorcerer. He looked ahead in panic. The guy approached him. He prepared his lips. Wind erupted from them. The ground beneath the villain's feet shook. He fell with a noise. The man looked at his stone in panic and screamed. Lloyd frowned. The sorcerer was dead. The brunette picked up his stone and thought that it was some kind of complex and well thought out spell. It ricochets as soon as the one who uses it moves. He looked around and thought that in that case, the city's barrier continued to grow. Suddenly, a hole appeared in it. The hero smiled and thought that there was the first one. Canavero looked away. A second hole appeared in the barrier. Lloyd took the stone from the sorcerer. The man frowned and thought who it was. Even if there was not enough mana, he had to complete the summoning. He stretched his hands up and began to read the spell. Suddenly, he looked away. Someone was calling him.